It's 1070 Ti time! Okay, so to be honest with you, with this, I don't particularly need to spend a lot of time on it. You know the side lights up green. You know it's got an 8-pin on the side. If you didn't, I've done a preview on RushKit. It looks just like all of the other cards on the shelf. And to be honest with you, it now belongs on the shelf. So the long and short of it is, it's going to be £419, which puts it in quite a kind of grey area, in that I've had a look around at the RX 64s this morning and they're all still above and around the 450 marks. It comes in below the RX 64, which is kind of where they wanted it to go anyway. So anyway, Nvidia, it's got a 1683 boost. Now, if you didn't know, I use 3 different versions of GPU-Z, well, 3 instances of GPU-Z, and then I have a maximum and an average set up as well. So after it doing the thermal test, or during it doing the thermal test, I should say, we got a maximum at stock, literally hadn't done anything, of 1911 megahertz. And then that gave us an average GPU core clock over that half an hour period running Unigine of 1829 megahertz. Whizzing through, like I said, GPU temperature testing, that then gave us 77 degrees with no fan changes, no nothing, literally click, play, bosh, 77 degrees maximum. Power draw, 330 watts for the entire system. It's an X99 system with a 6850 at 4.4 gigahertz. So literally the entire rig, 330 watts, and that was with Unigine on 4K with 8 times anti-aliasing. So, you know what I mean? Doesn't really pull a lot. You can look at all of the comparisons in the graphs for yourself to see where it kind of compares around and about. I thought compared to the 1080 it did quite well personally. So, Ghost Recon. Now, with the on this, I've got it in here on purpose, but what you need to see is look for the RX 64 balanced below it, because obviously there are 2 modes and you get the turbo mode as well. You need to remember with turbo, when you do that though, runs a bit warmer, uses more power, but it's an easy flick of a switch. So with the 64 in turbo mode on GRW, the 64 did run quicker. If we were to go Deus Ex, RX 56 actually beat it on this one if it was in turbo mode. You can see the 64 was a little bit further up. Now, you can go and have a look at more results on the OC3D website, because there are a lot more there, and I've actually probably chosen 2 of the worst ones there, if I'm perfectly honest. Now, there's always going to be the chit-chat about the fact that it comes in between the 1080 and the 1070, and surely you'd go and get a 1080. Well, for £80 more, if you go and have a look on the website at some of the other results, especially the frames per second results, for £80 more, I genuinely wouldn't be sure whether I would go 1080 or not. Because if you think about it, if you're going to go 1080, you're going to end up getting a low-end 1080 or something like that. And for the same sort of money, you could get a nice one of these and one that you can actually live with. And that's really the difference between this and the AMD cards. Yes, in some games, still the AMD cards can pull in front of this. But then in other games as well, and specifically in benchmarks, that yomps on its own. The AMD ones, they're a little bit harder to live with because they use more power, they're noisier, they're going to dump a lot more heat. This doesn't. Very minor, but it's points that need to be pointed out. So with the difference between the 2, it's always going to come down to what you want. But I think a lot of people see this as being a little bit pointless. I'm actually going to go with the other way, where I think this is almost making the 1080 look a bit silly, because it's such a good card for the money. And as you'll see when you go to watch the Strix review, which I have done, these actually overclock quite well. And yes, okay, you do have to overclock it to get it past the 1080, but it does very, very well, is probably the best way that I'm going to put it. So if it was down to me about having a vanilla 1080 or a nice, meaty, quiet, you know, look good in my system, maybe have some RGB on it, you know what I mean, maybe be bright white. Anyway, if it was the difference between a nice 1070 Ti and a vanilla plastic shrouded horrible 1080, I don't know, there's part of me that would go for the 1070 Ti. Now I get it, if you just want grunt, you can then still overclock the vanilla one and all that kind of stuff. But it just depends which camp you want to swing for. So if you want a nicer looking card with lower temps, nicer to live with, gonna look better in your system, I'd probably go 1070 Ti. If it's just about grunt and you've always got your cans on and you don't look in your rig, then you go the other way. But it gives us choice. There's no reason to get so hell-bent about it. The whole AMD thing, you do need to go between the games. As I've said, I've probably picked the 2 worst games I possibly could have done. But that was just to give you a bit of balance, because you could see with that DSX that the 56 did quite well. And if I'm totally honest there, and Nvidia won't like me talking about it, well, I would never buy a 64 anyway. Get a 56, overclock the bejesus out of it. It's pretty much the same thing I'd say about this one. So I don't know whether you like it or not, but I managed to get a review done quite quickly for a change. But anyway, there wasn't really a great deal to say. It's an Nvidia card. It fits perfectly in price between the 1080 and the 1070, as you would expect. And it fit in performance-wise as well. It fit in too well performance-wise, because that is why Nvidia is really funny about there being overclocked cards being sold, to the point where they're not allowed to change the base clock on them. And if you have a look on all the boxes, my Asus one would have said OC on it, and instead they had to put a sticker over the top of it and it said advanced binned instead. So they're blocking them from selling overclocked cards, because they know that if you get one of these and overclock it, it makes the 1080 pointless. And on that note,